since I've been live. I'm really excited for today because I'm doing an interview with raanguk. I'm gonna let them talk more about what that word means. I did not know what it meant, but they educated me on what it was. Here they go. So I'm gonna let them join. We're gonna all introduce ourselves once they're on. So you should see an option to request to join the live, and then I'll let you in. There we go.
Hello.
All right. Hello. How are y'all? Good.
Yeah, really good, thank you. How are you?
I'm excellent. So it's really late where you are.
Oh no, the party's just started. We'll be up until like 2.
There you go. Night owls. That used to be me at one point. So I'm excited. We talked a little bit on Zoom, but I'm excited for a, detailed conversation on all things colorism and related topics. So we'll start with some introductions. I'll introduce myself. I'm Dr. Sarah Webb. I created Colorism Healing way back in 2013, but over the years it has grown into an international project where one of the flagship projects is the International Writing Contest. Also doing workshops. A lot of them have been virtual lately for obvious reasons, but I do enjoy in-person workshops as well. And I'm an English professor at the University of Illinois in Springfield, and I teach a lot of creative writing courses. So I like to incorporate that into my work around colorism, hence the writing contest, right? And so you all can go ahead and tell folks who you are, a little bit about yourselves.
Great, thank you. So first of all, we just want to say that, you really inspire us. So we've been following your page for a while, so thank you for everything you do. So hello to everyone, my name is Monica. I'm the founder of raanguk, but I guess very similar to you, my educational background stems within colorism and colonialism. So I've been studying those particular aspects for about 7 years, but I'm currently doing a PhD at Queen Mary University studying colonialism and colorism.
Yes.
Hi everyone, I'm Rahila, and my background is in fashion, but raising awareness for colorism has been a passion, and with lived experience as well as hearing stories from other people. It's something that needs to be talked about, something that needs to be an ongoing conversation, and not something that okay, it happened and now move on to the next topic. No, it needs to be like I said, an ongoing open dialogue. And I'm co-founder of raanguk as well.
Yes, I love what you're saying about it has to be an ongoing dialogue. That was one of the reasons I started Colorism Healing. Was back when I first started, I was searching around for people who were talking about it, and it always seemed to be like a one-off thing. Well, we'll just mention it for this one blog post, but then we'll go back to talking about the current events, right? And there was no platform at the time that was consistently talking about the issue of colorism, like coming back to it, and in order to get into some of the nuances, right? Colorism is so complex, it's hard to get to the various nuances with just one conversation, right? So that's why multiple conversations with diverse people are so important. So tell us a little bit about wrong as a word, because that was very enlightening to me. I had never heard of it until our conversation, but I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, of course. So rang in 3 languages, so Hindi, Urdu, and Bengali means color. So they're pronounced slightly differently. So in Bangla we call it rong, so it's spelled ROWNG, but essentially it means color. And we acknowledge that colorism doesn't just affect a few tones or one skin tone. Actually, it can take shape across different races, different backgrounds, different circumstances. So that's why we've stuck to the word color, because we think it's universal.
Yes. And so tell people about where you're located, right? Because I think that international regional context is important. And then speak a little bit more about what prompted you to start wrong.
So we're based in the UK. And what? Oh, you can tell the story about why we kicked off Rang. I think you tell it.
I just want to, when you asked where we're based, I just want to say how, we're in the UK, you're in the USA. It's colorism affects everybody and anybody, and it's not like it's in one area, it's around the whole world, and it's in every single community as well. So I love how through social media we are now communicating, and we can share this message. And I love how, like, you share the same message as us and supporting each other as well. Like, it's not like, oh, let's not collaborate with this person because they're talking about the same thing as us. But no, we want to, because we want to get the same message across to everybody. Just wanted to say that. But the reason why we started is, like, I think we mentioned to every single person that we've ever spoken to about Rang, is that our initial plan was to start Rang as a social media the support system later on in the year, in 2020. Since the Black Lives Matter movement happened, at that moment in time, me and Monica both sat down and thought, no, it's crucial that we start and have a support system right now. Yes, there's so many other platforms out there, but the one extra won't hurt. So we were like, yeah, this needs to be done. We need to work together with every single person, regardless of your skin color, regardless of if you are dark skinned and you have struggles, you've experienced colorism and you have your shared experience and struggles that you want to share. We want to be your support system. If you need support, we are here. We want to be the voice to the unheard. And even if you're not a person of color, use your privilege to share the message. Be an ally of what we're trying to say. Just we never want to exclude anybody. That's the reason we created this platform, so that everybody is inclusive into one. And we're not making a box saying, yeah, we are raising awareness for colorism, but our platform is only for so and so and these skin tones. No, every single person can come and contribute in every single way, and I love how we have the power to do that.
Yes, I agree. And Jandel Crutch in the comments says, yes, use your privilege. Yeah. So I'm also of the mindset that every person of every race, every shade needs to be talking about colorism, needs to be educated about colorism, because it is a system that is perpetuated culturally, right? So it's not, dark-skinned people did not create the problem of colorism. So it's going to take more than just dark-skinned people to solve the problem, right? We weren't just out here saying, well, we're going to put ourselves, at the bottom of the color hierarchy, right? That was a system that was created, including white people, including people of all races, right? Especially as the world becomes more global, right? Then the sort of colorism amongst people of color becomes more obvious, right? Because we can interact more with people of other ethnicities and different nationalities and backgrounds. So I think sort of the anti-Blackness and various other forms that amongst people of color, we perpetuate colorism and forms of racism as well, is becoming more obvious, right? With recent generations, as technology makes the world more and more global. So I'm curious, do you all see yourselves, how would you describe your own skin tone? So one thing that I think is so important about having cross-cultural conversations is that even the perception of what's considered dark is going to be different depending on where you are in the world and depending on what your home community is. So in terms of your ethnic background or the cultural communities that you grew up in, what was considered dark in your community or dark skin in your communities, and how do you describe your own skin tone?
So I describe myself as a medium. I always have, but I'm very aware of this and I acknowledge this as well. Like, often Bangladeshi people are quite dark, so in comparison to them, I'm seen as lighter, but I don't position myself in that way. I'm always very proud of my heritage. I really like this question because I get asked this quite often, like, how do I identify myself? And I always identify myself as a British Bangladeshi, because I'm proud of that and the skin tone. And my grandfather is very dark, and my grandma is very light, and I see no difference between them because of skin tone. So I guess that's me in a nutshell.
I think I would describe my skin tone as same as medium, but like I said, there's been, you know, extended families that have said if I wear so and so such colors like a black scarf, it will make me look darker, or if I you know, wear certain makeup colors on my face, it will make me look darker. And I've never, me growing up, I've never ever looked in the mirror and thought I'm dark, or looked in the mirror and thought I'm light. Like, that has never crossed my mind. And that's me, where I grew up in Bangladesh, where it's a very hot country. I was there for 8 years, and then coming here, I've never looked at myself and thought, oh, I'm light or I'm dark. I don't think I've ever got any comments about that growing up. But then as I'm older now, I now realize there's been so many comments that I've been so naive to, and just let them pass because these are casual comments from older generations. Now that I'm this age, and you know, I've got educational background on what colorism is, and what how these comments are actually impacting so many people out there. When I hear these comments now, I put a stop to it, even if they're from family members or friends. Whereas back then, even I wasn't aware of these comments have meaning behind them. I just thought, yeah, it's just whatever they say. And we hear it so often. Like, I say this in every time we talk about colorism in South Asian communities, but I'm sure in every community, don't go outside because you'll get dark. Don't go out in the sun because you'll get dark. And like, I used to hear that growing up, but I never thought of anything of it then. Even say like 3 years ago, I never thought of it then either. It's just now that situations are becoming worse, there's so many things going on in the world that I'm, you know, being educated on as well myself, on how so many people are being affected by, because of their skin tone, situations that they're being put in just because they're darker skin. All these comments are coming back to me saying, oh wait, so and so said this to me. They did, in the back of their mind, they did mean something by it. It wasn't just like, don't like put sun cream on before you go out. It wasn't comments like that. It was, no, don't go out because you'll go dark. There's always these other comments. It's now that when you think about it later on, it's like, oh wait, now I know what they meant. Back then I didn't.
Right. It's true. Because we hear these things as really young people, right? And it makes sense that we can't fully process it when we're younger. But I think one of the goals, right, I think was what the work we're trying to do is, it's not so much about, oh, I'm going to feel guilty because I might have said these things in the past, or because I didn't pay attention in the past. But now that we are all waking up, right? Now that we are getting educated and learning what these issues are and what they mean and what's behind the comments, right? Even when people try to laugh it off, I think the important thing is like, what can we do now, right? There were some comments. I like to read the comments as I go. I hope it's not too distracting. And if anyone has a specific question, we will take questions as well. So Jandel Crutch was saying, you know, what specific comments, right? And it's interesting that that comment, people heard it in the UK. It's something that's said very often in the US, right? So hundreds of miles apart, right? Communities that maybe have never connected before have such similar perceptions, right? Even though like in some Asian communities, using the parasols and the umbrellas, right, when you go out. And so across the globe, that specific comment about not going out in the sun because you're going to get darker, I think is one of the universal comments that people hear. Amoeba says the worst is when they say something about the skin tone and laugh and expect you to laugh with them. Foolishness, right? So I think that goes into jokes and people saying, oh, it was just a joke, it was just a joke, right? But we know that jokes are a very undercover medium for getting across racist ideas or colorist ideas, right? And so, yeah, it might be presented as a joke, but the underlying tone or message behind it is one that's racist and colorist, right? Um, Elevated conjure, even that is interesting. Our dark-skinned siblings become aware of colorism at a much earlier age because of the impact of those comments. I think that's a really interesting point, elevated conjure, is that those, particularly when we have siblings who are different skin tones, right? And I don't know if you all have siblings, but I have actually Jandel Crutch is my sibling. The one right there with the little hand gesture. So she's several shades lighter than me. And so and we're also both girls, right? So we grew up as the same gender and then very different skin tones. And we were relatively close in age. So the comparisons, like it was so obvious to me, and I'm not sure if it was obvious to her. Maybe you can comment, Jandel. But it was so obvious to me how people treated me differently than her, right? And I know you all talk about having different skin tones in your family, having different, extended family that was different skin tones. So how do you all, now that you are aware of colorism, maybe, and like doing research on it in your PhD program, and also just like out here as activists, what would you say to people who are maybe just coming to this consciousness for the first time, right? People who might have noticed certain things, but had never really thought critically about it, right? What's the next step for them, right? Now that they're aware, what are some things that they might do next to progress even further in helping to address this issue?
I think for me, like my learnings and the message that I try to echo, like with colleagues and friends, is actually have an open dialogue and try and create a safe space. Don't go in with judgment, because actually we are aware racism and colorism is such a taboo topic, and it's a very sensitive topic. Like lives have been lost because of this, our history is founded on this, but you have to go in with that no judgment. Like someone might make comments that fall in under the colorism umbrella, but actually it's just to raise awareness that actually this can hurt this person in this particular way. So like I was reading quite a few posts about when someone of a lighter skin tone compares to someone of a darker skin tone and says, oh, I'm nearly the same tan as you, and oh, if I tan a bit more. For me, I'm okay with that, but actually somebody else, that could flare up that whole connotation around colorism, racist thoughts. So you just need to be sensitive and have awareness. But also, I have a colleague that had no idea what colorism was, and he put his hands up and said, look, Monica, I don't know what it is, but you talk about it so much, sit me down and tell me what it is. And actually just having that dialogue with him, he was like, oh, and he is not the one bit racist at all. He doesn't have a racist bone in his body, but he was saying, okay, I'm now going to word some things that I say to female colleagues differently, like about her skin tone or when they come back from holiday. And actually it's just having sensitivity around that. So that's me, that's what I would say. And I think you're quite active in terms of discussing it in the household, which can be very, very difficult. But even that approach isn't let's have an argument, let's create barriers. It's this is what your comment is doing, this is the impact it has, and actually if you continue to do this, our future generations will grow up with this message.
It's really difficult when you're speaking to the older generation, because they grew up and with these mindsets and this is like generations of thinking that this is what's deemed as beautiful, which is light skin, and fair skin. This is what they think is appropriate in this society. For them to change that mindset, it is a lot of hard work to sit them down, and for you not to get into a point where it's an argument. You have to sit them down. It has to be an educational discussion, which can be difficult in so many different households. But there's even on our Instagram page, we put a post on how you can tackle these conversations in your own households. But we're aware that it's very difficult, but it's a conversation that needs to happen. It's these casual comments from the older generations that have such impacts on the younger generation. And another thing is we need to change the mindsets of those that are younger, so that they not then passing it on to other people. Even for our generation, like if we were to have kids, we will not be teaching our kids what we were taught when we were young by the older generation. So in this needs to change now, so that the new generation do not have these mindsets of, you know, what the older generation is saying, like fair skin is beautiful, and, you know, don't go outside, all this. We need to be educated so that the future generation is on the same wavelength as us.
Definitely. And just having like an open-endedness around it, like there are going to be barriers, and we acknowledge that someone may be stuck in their ways, but it's often, in some cases it is, but it's often not malicious. Like my grandma has grown up on traditions like from back home, and she has believed that that has been right for 70 years, for then me to say to her, actually, so like in Bangladesh there is a practice that when girls get married they'll apply turmeric to her face, or when she's pregnant she has to drink almond milk to make the child fair, and that's the only reason, not any health benefits. And to actually tackle that practice where she's, you know, had it put on her, she's done the same for my mother. Actually you're shaking up a culture, so you have to be really sensitive around that and understand that they've come from this history. So that's what I mean by the open-endedness, like to have a positive dialogue, to give insight into your own experiences and other people as well. I feel like you have to put it into perspective. It's not just oh, this is affecting this and this. Actually, no, this affects me. This is going to now affect our future generations.
Yeah, we need to go into these conversations being open-minded as well, knowing that they've been thinking like this for generations and it's been taught to them. They weren't born thinking like this, they were taught this. We need to be mindful of that as well. So yeah, like I said, it's a very difficult conversation, but can be done slowly.
Yes. I think those are beautiful examples, and I love how you all talk about bringing these issues to older generations and the level of compassion that you all have. I think that's important because, especially within families, right? They're going to be in your life, right? So you don't need to burn bridges unnecessarily. And I think so. I'm wondering too. We've talked about what families say. I'm going to read some more comments, but I think to give you all time to think about it, how else do you see it being perpetuated, right? Within your communities or within, you know, UK culture in general or global culture, right? So one of the big ways it's perpetuated is definitely through families, definitely through older generations. But what do you see in terms of UK media or Bangladeshi media or just global media or schools, teachers, like outside the home? While you all are thinking about that question, I'm going to catch up on some of these comments. Belle Noir says, now that we know these ideas and mindsets cause harm and is a form of anti-Blackness, the work becomes, how do we counteract and normalize the harm? Ambi says, I have 7 siblings and I am the darkest, but I have my father's skin tone. I will never change it for anyone. Good for you. I love my siblings, though. They will be the first to tell off aunties when they say something, right? That's beautiful. Having siblings that, if they're lighter skinned, they recognize how things might be affecting you. I love that. Jandel says, I think so. It was so obvious to me. So she's referring to whether or not she noticed colorism when we were growing up. So she says, I think so. It was obvious to me because kids tried to make the comparison. As young as 5 years old, people would say you couldn't possibly be my sister because you were darker, right? And we have the same mother and father, right? I feel the burden to counteract really falls on light-skinned people. That's where the privilege lies. And that's from Chantel Alchemist. I think I'm saying that correctly. Thank you for saying that. I do think that those with more privilege in any situation have responsibility to use that privilege. I always say, don't just check your privilege, leverage your privilege, right? In support of other people. So when it comes to colorism, we definitely can't just have it be dark-skinned people talking about this issue, right? And that's why I appreciate, you know, Rong and Monica and Rahela, who are, you know, don't necessarily see themselves as darker skinned, but they still recognize and realize how important this issue is. So you don't have to be a dark-skinned person to speak out and to take the lead on conversations and not just wait to, you know, like someone else's post on Facebook about colorism, but you can post the thing about something on colorism. Elevated Conjures agreeing with Chantal says, absolutely agree. When I began unpacking colorism, I had to reconcile with how many things I'd heard my whole life that were colorist and anti-Black as F, right? Ebbs Mitch says, what's LS? Another word for light skin. Yeah, it's the abbreviation of light skinned. So yeah, we'll keep going. So I'm curious to know, and there's other comments. Oh wow, we had a lot of stuff come through, but we'll pause for now and just kind of talk about outside of the home. Was my question. How else do you see colorism being perpetuated globally or within the UK specifically, or your local communities?
So for me, this really does resort back to my PhD. So I'm looking at skin lightening adverts and actually the presence along social media. And actually it doesn't have to be a skin lightening advert. It could be the likes of, like, recently we've seen Estee Lauder, we've seen Olay, and they've been called out in terms of the terminology they use. So like the words illuminating and brightening, and actually they're applying that to a wider context and trying to make, I believe, people feel inferior about their skin tone and feel like the need that, oh, okay, my skin tone isn't good enough, so I now need to brighten it. Actually, what if we think about the word bright, what you're trying to do is trying to take something that's dark and brighten that. So that's definitely within the media, and just through the research I've been doing in the past couple of weeks, like there was one magazine, it was a Pakistani magazine, and it was, I think, 45 pages, and 24 of those were skin lightening adverts. Whoa. And I was like, that's crazy. Like, that some were small, some were big, but granted, out of like nearly half of that was based around skin lightening. And then unfortunately there is just this generic global beauty standard around the world, even in Bangladesh, Pakistan and India. I know it's a very big generalization, but actually a lot of the models often are of the lighter skin tone. It's not a true representation of what the Bangladeshi women are. There's no, men, sorry. There's no variation in skin tones. It's very one track, one-minded. I don't know if you wanted to chip in.
Yeah, I was just gonna, from what I was gonna say, but it fits in with, I think, Chantel, where she said, can we talk about how colorism affects jail sentence, hiring practices and media casting decisions? I wanted to touch on the media casting decisions. I was gonna say, for when I watch, you know, Asian TV shows, so like for me, when my parents are watching Bangladeshi TV shows and programs, I don't see a lot of dark-skinned women that plays the lead roles. So for someone that is, you know, anyone that is dark-skinned and who wants to get into that industry, into the acting industry, the music industry in that community, I can see how they can feel like they need to change their skin color to try get into that industry, because there's no one that you can relate to within that industry, no one that relates to your skin tone. So I think for us, it's being normalized that you have to be this skin tone to then be into this industry for you to be successful in this industry, or, you know, be hired for this company. That needs to change.
But also the because I've been looking at pop culture as well, there are so many singers that glorify the emphasis on light-skinned girls, and I'm not here trying to be anti-light skin. That's definitely not our stance, but actually there's such a glorification around it, and actually it's turned into a fetish. Like there are several rappers that will say, like, you know, Milky Bar skin girl, light skin girl. You never hear the narrative of just, I've just met a girl regardless of her skin tone. And also if we look into like Hollywood, there are several terms that are used, like whitewashing and blackfishing. And if you actually look at the origins of those concepts, it's around someone that's dark that has either been made to look a lot lighter, or someone that is white that's been made to look a lot darker. It's that whole dynamic around light and dark skin, light and dark skin. There's no just natural, let's embrace our natural skin tone, let's put this person on the front. And it almost becomes like a token piece as well now. Like we see someone and it's like, oh, let's praise this is great. It should be a normal thing. It should be a reality that we all see that there is someone from different races presenting, you know, on shows, in the Oscar Awards or whatever. But it's such a big moment now because there's not enough of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have some really good questions coming in, which is exciting.
Yeah.
Let's see. So Chantel Alchemist says, and if you want to correct my pronunciation, feel free to do that. Their question was, what can someone with no privilege or power to change colorist structures do to change colorism? Which I think is an interesting question, because we talked about people with privilege because of their lighter skin doing things to change colorism. But what can people who don't have light skin privilege do to change colorism?
So for me, it's sharing the message. So like the colleague that I referred to before identifies as British and a mix of Irish as well. And for him, it was just finding out more about it, just to make, I don't think he's going to go and change the world and speak to people about it, but just to make a conscious decision of what he says. But also sharing content from not just our pages, but other pages as well, like putting it on your story. Eventually it becomes drilled into people's minds, so that they may choose to skip the story, but actually there's something in the back of their mind. Like there are so many people that we've not connected with, but they follow us and they see stories about skin lightening or something's happened in the media and they tag us, and it's so heartwarming because they think of raanguk when they see this type of post. And just like sharing petitions, supporting businesses that are owned by people of colour. Like I know that term can be quite sensitive, but that's the way we say, like, people of colour, embrace, you know, their businesses, support them, give them that platform, help those that are unheard. I think that's, and it could be small actions. It could just be, so we have a petition, and if it takes like 5 seconds to sign it, but actually that one signature could make that difference. And you might feel like it's a small task, but for us that makes a huge difference. If it goes to be discussed further, you've helped make that change. It's not a us project, it's a we globally project.
Yes,
I think what you said is perfect. I was going to say similar. Social media has so much power right now. So, you know, I think it was Chantel that said this, like, what about the people that have no privilege? So you can do so much behind social media. Originally, we wanted our platform to be faceless. We didn't want our face to be on that platform. But then we just made the conscious decision of, no, it's fine. We should go out there and publicly speak about this topic and not just post, you know, just a post and leave it as that. We need to come out and speak. But even though we've seen so many pages that we don't know who are behind these pages, but the messages that they share and the posts that they are, you know, putting out there, it brings so much engagement, it brings so much attention to it, and is being shared. So if you feel like you have no power, social media has so much power. There's so much you can do. And like Monica said, it takes 5 seconds to sign a petition, and it could make such a difference to one campaign and for what we're trying to achieve, which is actually trying to stop the selling of skin lining and whitening products within the UK. So for you to just click onto the link in our bio and signing, which takes 5 seconds, it could make the biggest difference to that campaign. Yeah.
I'm just going to add one more point. I think I'm a huge advocate about self-awareness, like actually taking the time to educate yourself. And I'm not saying get a PhD or degree, actually just reading resources from those that have lived experiences so that you have a full knowledge of what colorism is and how it can affect people is the first step that anyone needs to take. Because once you acknowledge that and you can identify whether you engage in those practices or you don't, then you can help support others. I think if you miss that step, there may be things that you do that could implicate or, you know, show signs of, you know, you being racist or saying negative terms. Actually having that self-awareness and that reflection piece is so important.
Yeah. I was also going to add too, like, even though dark-skinned people might not be the most privileged in terms of colorism, that doesn't mean we don't have agency and power. And it doesn't mean we can't affect change in some way. So Chantel also says, equally, I believe there are many dark-skinned people who internalize self-hate from colorism who perpetuate it as well. And so that's kind of what my stance is as well, is that why I call it colorism healing is because if we don't heal, right, and I think all people need healing, but for example, a dark-skinned person who is not willing to ask, well, how have I internalized colorism, right? Then we're going to also perpetuate it. And so I know a lot of the comments that you all talked about that the older generation makes, or even comments that the younger generation makes, it's not just light-skinned people who make those comments, right? Dark-skinned people will also say, don't go out in the sun. I don't want to get any blacker than I already am. Dark-skinned people will also say, oh, my hair is too nappy. You know, I need to do something with my hair to make it straighter or make it longer, right? Or dark-skinned people will say, I can't date a dark-skinned person because I don't want my children to come out my color or my children to be lighter than me, right? So even though we are not privileged in terms of that hierarchy, we can still stop perpetuating it as well. And I think I'm always of the mindset that the system is so entrenched that we can't sit back and say, oh, well, that's their responsibility to fix it, right? I think we all have a role to play in fixing colorism and all of the isms that exist, but colorism in particular, light-skinned people definitely have a role, and I think we need to see more light-skinned people stepping up to use their privilege how they can and to divest from the system, right? And to be willing to acquiesce power, right? Like say, okay, these are benefits I'm getting and I'm going to say no to these benefits. Even light-skinned actresses saying, you know, I don't want this role, right? You're offering me this role, but I think a dark-skinned woman would be better suited for this role, right? And there are light-skinned actresses who've done that. But then there are also, again, like dark-skinned people, you know, a lot of times in the media we talk about, like you were saying, the rappers, right? A lot of those rappers who are saying those colorist things are dark-skinned, right? So I think all of us, and even dark-skinned women, like a dark-skinned mother, right? Because she was affected by colorism, might try to teach her daughter certain things to cope with being colorist. I might tell her daughter, you know, I know I've seen testimonies of dark-skinned women whose dark-skinned mothers gave them bleaching creams, right? I want you to have a shot. I want you to have a fair chance, right? So even all of us can be perpetuating colorism in some way. So again, regardless of your race or skin tone, you have to look at the ways you perpetuate this issue, and not just look at the ways you perpetuate this issue, but also look for opportunities to make a difference. Because no matter what color you are, you can call someone out on a racist joke, right? Regardless of what your skin tone is, if someone is casting a movie and everyone's light-skinned, you can speak up and say, hey, this casting is colorist. You can look at the dance team, right, or the sports team or the cheerleading team and say, you know, regardless of your skin tone, you can point out, like, why are all the cheerleaders light-skinned, right? Why are all the homecoming queens light-skinned? So I think no matter who you are, like, we can't avoid responsibility. We can't say, well, I'm just gonna sit back and watch and let other people solve this problem, you know, like looking around to see who's gonna step up, right? It's gonna take all of us for sure. There was also a question about, and I know I'm probably really way behind on the comments at this point, y'all. I'm sorry, there are so many comments coming through. And Instagram cuts us off at 60 minutes, right? And so we're already 40 minutes in. So we're gonna try to get to some of these. People were talking in the comments about other aspects of colorism, like employment and prison sentences and police brutality. I know you all briefly mentioned that, like early, like when you were introducing yourselves and talking about what Wrong is about. You kind of mentioned how people are literally dying because of issues like colorism. So do you want to shed more light on the way skin tone and variations in skin tone impact things like employment or interactions with police officers?
So I don't feel like I don't have much insight in terms of interactions with police officers, but in terms of
I didn't even tell you this, but I got stopped. I was already parked up, but police officers stopped, came park next to me because I was out quite late in the night. And for no reason, I was parked up with a friend just talking. It was quite late in the night, in not a main street area. The police officer came and parked straight up, came, talked to me and was like, you know, what's the reason for you being out here? And I was like, we're literally just sitting in my car that I own, and just talking, not doing anything. And he was like, do you have ID? He asked my friend, do you have ID? And I was like, what? And first, my instinct, as I am the person I am, I would have questioned it. I would have said a lot more things. But from seeing everything that I've been seeing on social media about what happens to people, I just gave my ID straight away. My friend even questioned. It was like, whoa, like you just gave your ID like straight away. And I was like, are you crazy? Why if I questioned it and something happened? You know what I mean? We don't, as a civilians, we don't have power. As the police officers can do whatever they want, can give whatever story they want. For me, seeing so many stories online, and it's horrifying what can happen. And I was like, yeah, 100%, I'm not doing anything wrong. I will 100% just give my ID over just like that for them to check. And honestly, there was no reason for him to stop us. There was no reason for him to think that we're being suspicious. Nothing like that. It's just how it is now, isn't it? And that's, I want to speak out about that, but at that moment in time, there's no way I would have said to him, no, I'm not going to give you my ID, because of things that can happen. And I can sit here and say, yes, I was scared to say no and not give my ID. Even when I questioned about his name, police station he was from, his ID, he was like, no, you don't need to know that.
Yeah.
So it's scary how they can respond. And he even said to me, he goes, when I try to speak out a little bit here and there to give these comments, he goes, enough with the attitude. And I was like, inside I was thinking I want to say so much more, but me knowing the extreme they can get to, I was like, nope, not doing that tonight.
Mm-hmm.
But it is disgusting what situations you can be put into and the extremes that it can get to. And I didn't like that. I had to not say things.
Yeah.
Someone put here a really good comment. I'm just trying to find, where is it? Oh, I'm not going to be able to find it now.
What was it about?
While you're looking for that, I wanted to respond to, in terms of colorism, and again, we've said this at the beginning, but it was sort of like in general terms, but colorism affects every aspect of your life. Like that's just clear in no uncertain terms. Like there's no aspect of life that colorism does not have an impact on, right? So it's often talked about in terms of beauty because that's the most visible, right? Like for people who are just becoming aware of colorism, it's so obvious and visible when you look at the media, right? And when you look at makeup and fashion industries or like dating practices, right? That's just in the forefront of people's minds. But there has been enough personal testimony as well as academic research, right? And then, you know, Monica, you're getting your PhD in that too, on how colorism, because darker skinned people are seen as less intelligent, then employers are less likely to think they're right for the job, because darker skinned people are considered to be more criminal, are less trustworthy, right? All of these biases, all of these stereotypes, all these implicit biases make darker skinned people of color, especially darker skinned Black people, more likely to be stopped by the cops, and then more likely to be arrested, accosted, harassed, beat, and murdered by the cops, right? Because if you look at the pattern of Black men in the US who have been murdered at the hands of police, Michael Brown, Eric Gardner, Alton Sterling, right? Philando Castile, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, all of these men are dark skinned, right? They also are often larger in stature, right? And so the stereotype that the dark-skinned Black man, you know, is going to be more of a threat, more threatening, or more dangerous, or he probably really did commit the crime because they're all criminals. And how often, you know, I always tell people too, how often do we see Black men who look like Terrence Howard or Will Smith or Jesse Williams, right? Or I don't know, any other, or even Barack Obama, right? How often do they make the news in terms of being murdered by cops? And so even without looking at the research, there actually is research, like articles that people can read, but even just watching the news, it becomes very obvious, very clear that there is inequality there in terms of how people with darker skin tones are treated by the police versus those with lighter skin tones. Yeah, so did you find the comment that you were looking for? And then we'll see.
Yeah, I've lost it again, but I just think it was back to the point about, I think you mentioned about employment. So I have two experiences through my friend. So it was just the case, well, there was a big story around LinkedIn this year at the start of the year, I think in February, about them being caught lightening some of the profile photos that are based on LinkedIn. So it was quickly nipped in the bud. You know, they sent out an apology, but that in itself is not okay. For my friend, I don't know if he's still here, he's actually shared on several occasions that he's got a very typical Nigerian name, and he feels like he can't use his name on a CV, and he will actually use a different name. And he's actually tested it as well, where he's submitted the same CV twice with a different name. The one with his actual name was rejected. So it's terrible. And like, he naturally has a very husky voice, and that is often described as him being angry, and it's like, no, that's his normal voice. Or even like the tone, like the way we say certain words. Oh no, you're being aggressive. Like, you wouldn't say that to someone that's light skinned.
Exactly.
And you're now taking his voice, which is something he can't change, and now saying he's aggressive. Is it because of his skin tone? I think it is.
Absolutely. There was something I had in my mind. Oh, I was going to also say too that one interesting experiment for anyone watching who wants to see some of the data that's out there about the implicit bias behind skin tone, but also test their own biases. There is an implicit bias test that you can take. Harvard has the implicit bias test about all sorts of isms in society, but they actually have one on color as well, on colorism, right? So you can take the test and see where you fall in terms of your level of implicit bias for or against darker skin tones. But then after you take the test, you see the results, right? You see the graph of all of the thousands of people who've taken the test, what the percentages is of people who have negative biases against dark skin that they aren't even conscious of. It's not like they're actively saying, oh, I'm going to go out and hate dark-skinned people today, right? And that's the scary thing about colorism and racism, is that even when we want to do good in our conscious minds, we have the subconscious programming that we might not even know we have. And so I think this work is so important because even like you were saying, people who are not the stereotypical racist or colorists who are going to make negative jokes or who are going to say stereotypes might still discriminate against you in hiring. Or a cop might, might not be racist in terms of his explicit opinions, but he might be more likely to pull the trigger if the person is darker skinned. So it's really important that we try to recondition our minds, right? And not just say, well, I don't dislike dark skinned people. That might be true for your explicit opinion of dark skinned people, but we also have to look at our unconscious biases and try to work through that as well. Because again, teachers are going to more harshly discipline dark-skinned students if they don't look at their unconscious programming, right? Cops are going to be more likely to attack and kill darker-skinned people if they don't look at the subconscious, the unconscious things as well. So it's not enough just to want to be a good person, Any other questions that you all have seen on here that we can answer? So we have about maybe 10 minutes. Let's see.
Well,
thank you. I want to say thank you all for all the wonderful comments and questions. And I'm sorry, it's hard to keep up with all of the comments and listen to what these two women are saying at the same time, but we do appreciate everything.
We are all of them, and we just want to say thank you from our side for all the support. And all, so many people are sharing their experiences as well, and we know that in itself can be quite difficult. So, we really salute you guys for being brave and sharing your thoughts and experiences.
I see a lot of conversations about power and giving up power. I feel like I missed something. There was a longer comment here. So Denig09, I'm not sure how to pronounce usernames. I feel like the symbolic meaning of one's color is taught early. Individuals learn to dislike certain shades due to socialization. But it doesn't stop there. Society teaches us to align reductionist. That was a comment that I noticed earlier on, and I think the symbolic meaning, and when we say it's taught, it doesn't even have to be explicitly taught, right? Like even if no one ever says dark skin is bad, you will pick up on that symbolic meaning, right? Just by how people are treated, things that people don't say, right? Things that you don't see in the media, right? You don't ever have to see a negative depiction of a dark skinned person. Sometimes just not seeing dark skinned people is going to implicitly teach you that these things are bad, right? So I think it's interesting that these symbolic people, like kids know at a very young age, right, what value is placed on their skin tone as well as on the skin tone of others. There's so much here.
We love it.
It looks like you all had a very productive and fruitful conversation, like in the comments itself. But I don't want us to get cut off before we have a chance to like really wrap up our thoughts. So like, could each of you kind of speak to where you hope your work leads to, right? You have a current initiative with Raang, you're using social media. What is like your ultimate mission? Like, what's the outcome that you're hoping for? And what are some of the, practical means that you see about going towards that vision?
Do you want to go? So I'll go first. So for me, obviously, so as part of my research, not to just have it on a bookshelf, actually for action points to come with it. I think there needs to be more discussion with our government in terms of schools as well. Like, I think there needs to be more around body image as well, and how colorism fits within that. So something as part of a curriculum. Like, I'm not saying I'm going to change it myself, but it'd be really good to see more of these conversations happening, because it's great that you and I are having this conversation, but actually a lot of young kids pick up these comments and these ideologies, and actually there's no one there to sort of nip it in the bud, or just say, no, this is why we have this, and this is different skin tones, and we embrace them as one. And definitely just to see run grow in the sense of helping people feel empowered to embrace their natural skin tone. You know, we have lots of DMs come to us, and we just want everyone to feel like it is a safe space. We're not here to judge, like, and we've said this from the beginning, like if someone comes to us and says, look, I'm a user of skin lightening products, okay, that's fine, as long as you've had consent and you have a conscious awareness of the health implications, and actually that you are beautiful without it, and you're still wanting to use that. We're not here to then enforce a decision upon you. We're just here to, you know, outline there are harms to it, but also that you can be natural and you don't have to feel judged by anyone. So that's for me.
I really like that comment by Shanaz. She said we need to educate the kids that dark women have darker underarms, and that is nothing wrong with that. There's so many opinions of what color women's armpits should be. And it's crazy to me.
Yeah.
But in terms of what's our goals, for me, it's always been have the conversations within your own households first. And that's something I'll always tell people. And yeah, it's difficult, but we want to give the support. So, you know, through our posts, we give advice on how to start conversations within your own households, and how you can start a conversation with, you know, your grandma who have had these mindsets for generations after generations, and how to start the conversations, just so the future generations don't have to go through the same difficulties or same struggles that some of us in this generation had to go through, and obviously so many people in the past generations. It's so that we as a platform can help and give the support to someone to then go and have these conversations, as long as they feel like, yeah, they're educated, they have enough knowledge to have these conversations. I think that's a good beginning for us.
I think, like, you've touched on this so many times, but we understand the word colorism itself is huge. So, like, through our podcast, we're talking about colorism in its different shapes and forms, like when it comes to education, when it comes to divorce, when it comes to marriage, when it comes to employment. So we're actually trying to break it down, and not simplify it, but actually have a dialogue about it, like how it's affected different people. So our first podcast was with someone who is half British, half Pakistani, and she is a very light skin, but actually she's had the experience of colorism through her husband, and still now, because she's just never seen as part of one community. She's too fair to be part of the Pakistani community, but then she's too dark to be part of the British community. So it's definitely having more conversations, and I think that's really crucial.
Yay. Okay, well, I'm going to let that be the final word, everyone. You can follow both of us. So if you're watching, you should see our profile pictures at the top left hand screen, unless Instagram has changed the design. So if you click on that, you'll be able to click on both of our profiles, make sure you're following, and continue the conversation, right? This is why this is important. So anytime you see us going live, hop on the live, share, posts, follow all the other Instagram accounts that are talking about colorism. Don't let this be the last time you have a conversation about it, because books have been written on this issue, right? And so there's always more to learn, more to unpack, and more that we can do. So thank you both so much. And I look forward to seeing, what else you all do. Enjoy the rest of your night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you.